The year 297 of Friderold, the Age of Peace. Death is a part of life, Orca whispered into her son's ear. Even though Brecca's arm was drawn back, the ash spear gripped tight in the small white-knuckled fist. As the spearhead aimed at the reindeer in front of them, she could see the hesitation in his eyes, in the set of his jaw. He is too gentle for this world of pain, Orca thought. She opened her mouth to scold him, but a hand touched her arm, a huge hand, where Brecca's was small, rough-skinned where Brecca's was smooth. Wait, Thorkel breathed through his braided beard, a cold misting of breath. He stood to her left, solid and huge as a boulder. Muscles bunched in Orca's jaw, hard words already in her throat. Hard words are what are needed for this hard world. But she held her tongue. Spring sunlight dappled the ground through soft swaying branches, reflecting brightly from patches of rimed snow. Winter's last hoarfrost kiss on this high mountain woodland. A dozen reindeers stood grazing in the glade, a thick antlered bull watching over the herd of cows and calves as they chewed and scratched moss and lichen from the trunks and boulders. A shift in Brecca's eyes, an indrawn breath that he had held, followed by a burst of explosive movement, his hips twisting, his arms moving. The spear left his fist as a sharp iron sliced through air, hissing. A flush of pride in Orca's chest. It was well thrown. As soon as the spear left Brecca's grip, she knew it would hit its mark. In the same heartbeat that Brecca loosed his spear, the reindeer he had chosen looked up from the trunk he had been scraping lichen from. Its ears twitched, and it leaped forwards, the herd around it breaking into motion, bounding and swerving around the trees. Brecca's spear slammed into the trunk, the shaft quivering. A moment later, there was a crashing from the east, the sound of branches cracking, and a form burst from the undergrowth, huge, slate-furred and long-clawed, exploding into the glade. The reindeer fled in all directions as a beast loped among them, oblivious to all around it. Blood pulsed from a swarm of wounds around its body, long teeth slick, its red tongue lolling, and then it was gone, disappearing into the forest gloom. What was that? Brecca hissed, looking up at his mother and father, wide eyes shifting from Orkel to Thorkel. A fell wolf, Thorkel grunted as he broke into motion. The stealth of this hunt had been forgotten. He pushed through undergrowth into the glade, a thick-shafted spear in one hand, branches snapping. Orca and Brecca followed. Thorkel dropped on one knee, tugged a glove off with his teeth, and touched his fingertips to droplets of wolf blood, brushing them across the tip of his tongue. He spat, rose, and followed the trail of wolf blood to the edge of the glade, then stood there, peering into the murk. Brecca walked up to his spear, the blade half sunk into a pine tree, and tried to pull it free. His body strained, but the spear didn't move. He looked up at Orca, grey-green eyes and a pale, muddied face, a straight nose and strong jaw framed with crow-black hair. So much like his father, and the opposite of her. Apart from his eyes, he had Orca's eyes. I missed, he said, his shoulders slumping. Orca gripped the shaft in her gloved hand and tugged the spear free. Yes, she said, as she handed Brecca his spear, half an arm shorter than hers and Thorkel's. It was not your fault, Thorkel said, from the glade's edge. He was still staring into the gloom, a thick braid of black, grey-streaked hair poking from beneath his woolen nail-binding cap. His nose twitching, the fell wolf startled them, Why didn't it kill any of those reindeers? Brecca asked, as he took his short spear back from Orca. Thorkel lifted his hand, showing bloodied fingertips. It was wounded, not thinking about its supper. What did that to the fell wolf? Brecca asked. A silence. Orca strode to the opposite end of the glade, her spear ready as she regarded the dark hole in the undergrowth from where the wolf had emerged. She paused, cocked her head, a faint sound drifting through the woodland like a mist. Screams. Brecca joined her. He gripped his spear with both hands and pointed into the darkness. Thorkel, Orca grunted, twisting to look over her shoulder at her husband. Orca grunted, twisting to look over her shoulder at her husband. He was still staring after the wounded wolf, with a last lingering look and shake of his fur-draped shoulders. He turned and strode towards her. More screams, faint and distant. Orca shared a look with Thorkel. Asgrim's stading, faint and distant. Orca shared a look with Thorkel. Asgrim's steading lies that way. No. Faint and distant. Orca shared a look with Thorkel. Asgrim's steading lies that way, she said. Harrick, Brecca said, referring to Asgrim's son. Brecca had played with him on the beach at Fella on the occasions when Orca and Thorkel had visited the village to trade for provisions. Another scream, faint and ethereal through the trees. Best we take a look, Thorkel muttered. Heya, Orca grunted in her agreement. Their breath misted about them in clouds as they worked their way through the pine wood, the ground thick and soft with needles. It was spring, signs of new life in the world below. But winter still clung to these wooded hills like a hunched old warrior refusing to let go of his past. They walked in file, Orca leading, her eyes constantly shifting between the wolf-carved path they were following and the deep shadows around them. Old, ice-crusted snow crunched underfoot as trees opened up and they stepped onto a ridge, steep cliffs falling away sharply to the west, ragged strips of cloud drifting across the open sky below them. Orca glanced down and saw reed-thin columns of hearth fire smoke rising from Fella far below. The fishing village sat nestled on the eastern edge of a deep blue-black fjord, the calm waters shimmering in the pale sun. Gulls swirled and called. Orca, Thorkel said, and she stopped, turned. Thorkel was unstoppering a leather water bottle and handing it to Brecca, who, despite the chill, was flushed and sweating. His legs aren't as long as yours. Thorkel smiled through his beard, the scar from cheek to jaw giving his mouth a twist. Orca looked back up the trail they were following and listened. She had heard no more screams for a while now, so she nodded to Thorkel and reached for her own water bottle.